And that's all the games we have here in Week 11. There's going to be a lot of entertaining games. I'm sure a lot of high scoring, close games, high stake games that we have here in Week 11. So make sure to check out as many games as you can. I assure you guys, you're not going to want to miss a lot of this action that we're going to have over the weekend. But we do have a couple more topics to get to. We're going to continue to talk about Deion Sanders. We mentioned him yesterday in regards to his son getting drafted. But could Deion tag along and also be drafted along with his son to whatever team ends up getting Shedeur Sanders? I'll explain what I mean by that and the rumors swirling around Deion and the NFL after our next break. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Back here now quickly to discuss our next topic, sort of a continuation of what we discussed yesterday in regards to not necessarily just directly the NFL, but something that will affect the NFL at least at the earliest next year. Because yesterday we talked about Deion Sanders and we discussed the draft and how he could affect where his son could go. You know, he's going to be very involved in trying to make sure that Shedeur Sanders gets to a place, a system where he can grow, he can develop, and it's best for him, not just get drafted to the worst team possible, potentially, if he goes number one or something like that, and really being just another one of these stories where he's mismanaged and it's just a complete disaster, right? Deion Sanders is not going to let that happen, and not only his son, but also Travis Hunter. He made sure to say that he's going to, be involved, behind the scenes, making sure they go to the appropriate situations in the NFL. What we didn't mention, though, was Deion Sanders himself potentially also going along with his son to wherever he gets drafted as maybe the new head coach for any one of these teams that could be in position to get Shedeur Sanders. And what Deion's done at Colorado, firstly, is nothing short of, remarkable. It's nothing short of just great, excellent work that he's done there, right? Because to take a one-win Colorado team to now potentially winning the Big 12 and being maybe in the college football playoffs if things fall their way and they get a little bit of help, it's a remarkable, just change of pace from one year to the next and how good they've become, the development that he's made with some of the players and his coaching staff and everything like that. I'll never forget what he said, during the first year where things, kind of fell off towards the end. And he spoke in the media and he said, essentially, like, you better get me right now. Like, you better get your shots in now because the next few years I'm going to get better and it's going to be a lot harder to try and get these shots on me. And he wasn't lying. He wasn't lying because right now I believe they're 7-2 or 6-2 as of right now. And he's done a remarkable job, not just in terms of the football field, but the culture and the program and everything he brings with being Deion Sanders, obviously, as well as doing an excellent job is huge for that school. So that's, great that he's done that at the college level. But this kind of started to pick up a little bit of heat when yesterday on ESPN during one of their shows, they brought up the possibility yesterday through some of the reports or through some of the hearsay they might be listening to that it could be a situation where, we're not just bringing this up because it's just been pulled out of thin air, like, oh, maybe, like, what if this happened? It has been a subject of discussion, just, loose discussion of, like, what would Deion be in, a situation where he comes with Shedeur Sanders to a situation where both of them come, Shedeur's drafted there as well. It has been brought up, I believe, in some scenarios within the NFL, right? It doesn't mean nothing's going to happen or anyone's actually thinking of doing it. It's just been brought up as a possibility. And it is noteworthy, I believe, just because it's been brought up, in NFL sort of related discussions, not just, guys on TV talking about it. They do talk about it, but it's because they do hear it from, sources coming from the NFL, obviously. So, we look at the teams that could be involved now, right? If this could ever develop into anything, what teams would be in position, right? If we think of Shedeur, and I guess we throw Travis Hunter in here as well, too, they're both going in the top 10. There's no way they don't. So, right now, looking at the teams in the top 10 in order, the number one overall pick right now would go to Jacksonville. Then it would be the New York Giants. Then it would be the Las Vegas Raiders. Then it would be the Titans. Then the Cleveland Browns. Then the Carolina Panthers. The Saints. The Patriots at 8. The Jets at 9. And the Dallas Cowboys at 10. That's the top 10 as of right now on Friday. If the season ended today, right, those would be the top 10 teams in the draft. And really, to kind of get this into a place where it could ever be possible, I would, point out that Shedeur fits most of these teams that need a quarterback, but Deion also, one of the most important factors, going back to what we talked about yesterday, would be that he would have to look at this organization. He would have to look at, I'm sure, the coaches and, like players involved or people involved with decision making and the system, the infrastructure, like he put it yesterday. He would have to look at that from a, I guess, father standpoint or coach standpoint and kind of sign off on it. As, as ridiculous as some people might think that is, he made sure to say, right, how we started all of this, that he was going to make sure Shedeur and Travis ended up in where he thought it would be best fit for them to continue their development. So even if Shedeur fits most of these teams that need a quarterback, Deion would still have to be on board. And what's interesting too is how many of these teams not only, need a quarterback, but also how many of them need a head coach. And I don't know which would be willing to take a big jump like that with Deion Sanders, and which team would seriously consider bringing in Deion after about 2 seasons there in college as a coach and, just make him an NFL coach right away. It's not something we completely not seen before. We've seen it with Cliff Kingsbury, Matt Rule, Urban Meyer. Not the greatest job, probably one of the worst jobs, but it's happened nonetheless. You look at Jim Harbaugh too, just this year. Different just because Jim has been an NFL coach and he has played in the NFL, but with Deion too, it's a little bit unique just because yes, he would fit the mold of a Cliff Kingsbury or Matt Rule where, no NFL coaching experience, but I think he would also relate to Jim Harbaugh because Jim did play in the NFL. Definitely not the same success that Deion had or the notoriety that Deion had, but, Deion, for how, significant of a player he was and how larger than life he seemed, he would instantly garner the attention, the respect of everybody, I think. Usually when he walks into any room, any situation like that, people look at him and think, that's Deion. If he's going to talk to you about football, you're probably going to side with him on whatever he says. So, that's kind of where he brings that advantage, and he's already shown to be a leader of men, a culture builder, a guy that's going to come in, not apologize for being himself, and I think a lot of these teams need someone like that, quite honestly, but still, it would have to, first, would Deion even come if he was offered a job? He said yesterday during his interview that he loves where he's at right now, and he has said before that, barring any changes that I'm not aware of, that he has said he does prefer the college level just because he does prefer kind of nurturing and helping young men grow into men, obviously, into professionals, and then dealing with NFL players who might not be 100% committed, that are concerned about money and things like that. He would rather focus on college level. That's the last I've heard about that, but it is a factor, obviously, right? whether or not he would actually even want this as an opportunity. But you can't help but think about it, especially during the off season where everything kind of is thrown for a loop. You got trades, you got signings, you got things just going all over the place with the NFL. One of the more active off seasons in all of professional sports. So anything could really change and happen, obviously, from now until like February or March or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, like, if you look at the fits with these teams in the top 10 and we speculate where we would like him to go or where we would think would be the best fit for him, out of the top 10 teams, the teams that right away I would clear off and think that there's no way he goes there would be the Jaguars, the Cowboys, the Patriots, because the Jaguars just gave a ton of money to Trevor Lawrence. I know they could realistically trade him. It's not impossible, but it would look very bad. It would look very bad if they gave him all that money and then they just traded him this offseason. It would be a bad look for them. It's kind of embarrassing. Same thing for the Cowboys. They made Dak the highest paid quarterback in the NFL, in NFL history. So for you to just trade him the next year or, in a couple years, it's just another embarrassing thing for the Cowboys also. So yeah, Deion would be great probably in both locations, but the quarterbacks are what's really holding it back. Same thing with the Patriots. They got their guy. Drake May, and he's been looking pretty solid, so I don't think you offset that, obviously. The other ones, some of these teams where, yeah, I think it could be a fit, but I don't think Deion would agree with going there because I don't think they're great necessarily from the organization standpoint, would be Cleveland, with all the negative history they have with first overall quarterbacks and all the quarterbacks they cycled through. Just look at Deshaun Watson as well. Maybe more so to do with him, but regardless, quarterbacks going there don't usually have the best of time. For whatever reason, I don't think Deion would agree to essentially go there. Then the Carolina Panthers, same thing. Not a lot of people like their owner, David Tepper. And the way that they've handled Bryce, obviously, doesn't endorse them very positively, so they're out of the question. The Giants, same thing. I think it's better than Cleveland and Carolina, but the Giants, Hard Knocks, how they treated Saquon, not really a fan of that. I don't think Deion would really mess around with that too much, so I think that one's unlikely. And then the Jets are a little bit on the fringe. I could kind of see it happen, but still, with the kind of just nonsense that has gone on with them, I'm not 100% confident Deion would go there. My most likely of spots would probably be the Titans, the Saints, and my number one spot where I think Deion and Shedeur, if this was ever going to be anything, would be perfect fits in, would be Las Vegas. And I like Antonio Pierce. Maybe, I don't know, if he's not going to be a head coach and they do fire him if the season doesn't get any better, maybe he could stick around as another coach, but I think Deion could fit in there as the head coach. Shedeur, Las Vegas, Deion, Las Vegas, everything would be so perfect with who they are, the attention, everything to bring to that city, and turn that whole organization around. I think it's so perfect not to happen. And what's kind of funny about this is that yesterday Deion said yesterday that he would like someone in the organization who knows, essentially what they're doing when it comes to the quarterback position and what it takes to run a successful infrastructure of an organization and really know what they're doing, obviously, right, essentially. And what Deion said when it came to what he wants from an ideal scenario is exactly that. Someone that knows what they're doing with the quarterback, but also with a successful organization, to get the best from Shedeur Sanders. And it adds on to my point about the Las Vegas Raiders, why I think that's the perfect fit. Tom Brady, the new owner, a part owner of the Las Vegas Raiders, who knows more about what to do with a quarterback, who has talked one of the most about developing quarterbacks and the problems now with quarterbacks now in the NFL and actually developing them. I don't think it's a coincidence, and this might be the conspiracy theory in me talking, but I don't think it's a coincidence. Tom part owner of the Raiders. Every time the Raiders lose, I think Shedeur Sanders goes on Twitter and tweets like "God is good" or something like that. You guys can go look it up. I'm not lying. I saw it on the Pat McAfee show. Every time, I think there's something there with Tom, Deion, the owner Mark Davis talking to Shedeur, kind of having hush hush talks about Shedeur being their quarterback, just next year. I don't think all of that stuff is a coincidence, and it feels like a perfect fit. Obviously, the lights, the attention in Las Vegas, Deion, Shedeur. I think it's a perfect match. So if this was ever going to be anything, Las Vegas would be the spot for me. I think it makes too much sense. I don't think they're going to win that many games going forward either. Just the way that they're looking. And, they have good players. Max, Brock Bowers, they're looking great. Christian Wilkins. It'll change so much if Deion and Shedeur actually go there. Just when you get guys like that in your building, it changes everything, quite literally. And I think that's what Vegas needs at this point. But right now, it's at the very amateur level of actually happening. It's just kind of discussed right now. So we still have a long way before that actually happens. But in the meantime, we're going to get to our last segment of the show, continuing our unanswered questions series. Yesterday, we talked about the NFC North. Now today, we're going to get to the NFC East, fitting for yesterday's game between the Commanders and the Eagles. So we'll be right back to close out this episode with more unanswered questions around the NFL. Thank you guys for joining me here on the last segment of today's show. Just continuing our series from yesterday that we started it. Some more unanswered questions around the NFL, going through each division and pointing out the biggest unanswered question that remains for each team and just discussing it and how, they could address it going forward. Not just in 2024, the rest of the year, but also in the future. And that seems to be a theme with a couple of these teams here in this division in particular. But starting off with one of the teams that we saw yesterday, the Washington Commanders, the biggest question remaining for me that's remained unanswered will be, can Cliff Kingsbury do his part in getting this offense back to where we saw them, just like 4 to 5 weeks ago, where their offense was flawless, the running game was exceptional, Jaden Daniels, was in there in the MVP conversations. Can Cliff Kingsbury do his part to get this offense back and help his rookie quarterback as much as possible? Because we talked about their offensive struggles and Daniels, kind of slowing down right in his first year. And we talked about the losses against 3 of the top defenses in the NFL in Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia. So maybe in this offense now where we've hit like a rough spot where things aren't flowing as naturally. Terry McLaurin being their best receiver, their best weapon on offense. I know it's hard to get him the ball. I know everyone's focused on taking him away, but how about we just try and get him the ball a lot earlier? I know you want to establish the run, and this might be the only time I ever say anything like this because of how emphatic I've been about starting with the running game. This might be one of the only times where I'm thinking, if Terry's really your one X factor type of guy, why not try and get him the ball quick, early, and often, right? Screen passes, maybe jet sweeps or anything like that. Just quick out routes, hitch routes, things like that to get him the ball early, get him going earlier, kind of put the defense on notice. I think it'll go a long way, and that's only the beginning of it, right? He's too good and he's too important to have a night like he did last night. And all the credit to the Eagles, but you got to get him the ball. You got to get him the ball a lot, in my opinion, right? No one's coming to help. You're not going to bring in another receiver, obviously, right? This is all you've got, so you have to try and get him the ball as quickly as possible. And then on sort of a similar sort of point, get Jaden Daniels going a little bit earlier. Running ability. I know you don't want to necessarily have him run like 15 times a game, but use his legs a little bit more often. More design runs, more RPOs, and things like that. Try to get that involved a little bit more, move the pocket as well to keep the defense off balance a little bit more. I think it's become a bit too stagnant over the last couple of weeks, and like I said, I like them prioritizing the running game, but I think it's just been a tad overdone a little bit, especially last game, because I saw a bunch of plays where every single play was just a handoff, and I'm thinking, all right, are they going to sprinkle in something here, like a little play action? Are they just going to pass it or just try and run the ball all night? You can't be one-dimensional. You got to sequence it a little bit, so it shouldn't make their offense, passing-wise, inept. They're too good. Jaden Daniels is too good, too accurate to be one-dimensional. So Cliff Kingsbury, has a lot of work to do to try and get this offense humming again and finding new creative ways to get this offense going again. So that's really what I'm waiting to see, hopefully answered for me going forward. Then getting to the Eagles as well. For me, again, can they address their slow starts to the year? Are we going to see them address it, get better from constantly? It feels like every game they start losing, or they start by putting up like 3 or 7 points, or not double-digit points in the first half. It always seems like it's just a one-digit sort of scoreline for them in the first half. And last night, despite the win, Philadelphia continued its bad start to games. They didn't get a point until there was 19 seconds left in the first half. And although Jake Elliott did miss a couple field goals that he should make, it's happened all year. It's not just yesterday where it's this sort of like fluke scenario, right? It's happened all year where this team, if they fall behind and teams, jump on top of them and get out in front of them by a couple scores, then they become one-dimensional. Jalen Hurts tries to get them back in the game. He overdoes it, or really the offense overdoes it passing-wise, chasing the game from that point on, and it usually leads to turnovers. The last time we saw a team take advantage of it, quite honestly, was the Bucs. The Bucs was the last team that really took advantage of it, and the Eagles have gone better on the defensive side of the ball, certainly, but I think it's still kind of rearing its ugly head a little bit here and there. I just don't think anyone's really taken advantage of it. And does that have to do with the level of opponents they've played? Maybe, but it was there yesterday for the Commanders. I thought they just didn't take advantage of it. For an Eagles team to put up 3 points in the first half, for the talent that they have, you got to take advantage of it, or their talent is eventually gonna click and wake up, right? And they're gonna beat you by 8 points last night. So you got to take advantage of it. Looking at it all year, in how bad they've been, they've scored 30 points on 24 total drives that have started in the first quarter. And the only team to be worse than that and have fewer points than the Eagles in that category is the Chicago Bears. They're down there with the Bears, and that's nowhere you want to be if you have Super Bowl aspirations, if you have the personnel to go out and win the Super Bowl, right? You don't want to be in that category, especially, starting games off slow. You can't really do that and just have comeback victories all throughout the playoffs. It's not going to work. It's not sustainable. So that is something that they have to get over. I'm not saying they're getting just bailed out by being very good and talented, but it certainly helps, right, in situations like this. But they need to start faster and start getting out in front of these other teams, because it'll be less stressful, obviously, but it'll lead to just easier games. Every game feels like it's a little bit harder for them in some regards. So getting out to quicker starts will be something that I hope the Eagles can answer going forward. Then the two other teams, right? This is where we draw the line for long-term and short-term unanswered questions, because the Giants have a long-term question that still remains unanswered. What's the plan for them for their new quarterback? Because I think Daniel Jones' time in New York is over unofficially. I expect the Giants to announce his benching next week, either Monday or Tuesday after their bye week, and to try and avoid the injury guarantee that would come if he does get injured the rest of 2024 or at some point in 2024, his salary next year is guaranteed. So to avoid that, I think they're just going to bench him. I expect it to happen. So now looking ahead, with a projected top 3 pick at this moment, they need to get 2025 roster, their game plan, their blueprint for what they want this team to be in order. I'm not saying they have to start planning for that next week, but you have to make sure you get your cards right. Like, honestly, because you try to restart with Daniel Jones, the draft pick, whatever, it was way too early, like everybody said, and they surprised everybody by drafting him 6 overall, and that already was a surprise, and you failed catastrophically at that. Daniel Jones' fault, but also the organization's part mostly for the drafting, the scouting of a player, for really not helping him out too much in the beginning. Then once they did, it was just not really there. So you got to get this next opportunity to have such a high draft pick, even higher than what you had this year, and probably when you drafted Daniel Jones. These opportunities don't just come, every other year, unless you're really bad, and I don't think the Giants are really, really bad. They got good players on their team, so if you're going to have a high draft pick like this, and it's gone really bad for you this year, you have to take advantage of it, right? You can't be in a situation like Chicago where things go bad, you don't do enough work from obviously the player standpoint, right? But of course the coaching standpoint and the right coordinator and things like that. You have to get every single thing, and you have to account for every single thing when we're talking about such a huge investment like it is drafting a quarterback so high. And you look at Chicago, and then you look at Washington and Denver and even New England and how they've done it. They've sort of provided a little outline for you. So how much can you take from them and try to address this problem going forward? They have a lot of decisions to make in terms of who you add, who you re-sign, and things like that. Do you address the offensive line? Do you draft another wide receiver? Do you bring in another tight end and things like this? All these things that they have to address, on top of adding, to Malik Neighbors, obviously very good, Dexter Lawrence very good, Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau. They got good players. The quarterback is obviously the main piece of it all. So trying to figure that out and get that right is the most important part. So that's what I'd like to see them answer going forward. And lastly, the Dallas Cowboys. An unanswered question for me that will decide a lot for them going forward is how quickly they decide to extend Micah Parsons, or in a catastrophic alternate universe somewhere, do they not extend them, right? They're going to extend them, I feel like, but there's a universe out there where they don't. So in this universe, in reality, how quickly can they extend him, right? They still have him for his 5th-year option next year before he is a free agent in 2026. So will we see a repeat of their latest mistake, right? With waiting so long for CeeDee Lamb, waiting so long with Dak Prescott. Are they going to wait to the absolute last minute on his 5th year and maybe pay a higher price, or are they going to do it this offseason? But with that, where the Cowboys are right now, they need a lot of help. So paying Michael Parsons a lot of money earlier is what you'd think you'd want them to do, but they still have a lot of other spots that they need to address. So do you kind of hold off this time and address the other parts and then wait for Michael Parsons later next year maybe? That's a debate that they're going to have. And if you do extend Micah, like I think most people expect them to, you have the highest paid edge rusher, the highest paid receiver, and the highest paid quarterback all on your team. Is that something that spells out a winning formula, a championship level formula? I don't think so, but it's hard when you have three of these guys, where they are in their careers right now, all deserving money like this, but I don't know if it's particularly smart for the Cowboys to do this. I feel like they're going to anyway, but they have a lot of the other positions to address, and that question, how quickly they do it, I think will be very telling for how quickly they return to relevancy, or how much deeper they get into the hole that they've dug themselves into regarding contracts, the makeup of this team. That's going to be a huge question, probably the biggest question of this upcoming offseason. So it is something that we're going to keep track of, obviously, but that is the last thing we'll cover on today's show. Thank you guys for joining me. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the GSMC Chipshot Football Podcast, as well as following the network on all forms of social media. If you want to see more of the show, check out the Podcast Network channel and the Sports Network channel on YouTube for more coverage around the NFL with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Remember to join me each and every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, where we talk more about the NFL, breaking news, discussions, and everything to do with the NFL. So I hope you guys have a great weekend. Go out, watch the games this weekend. Go out and watch the Jake Paul fight tonight. That should be interesting. And come back on Monday and we'll talk about all that stuff. So I'll see you guys on Monday. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you guys next week.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't